you listening to this and you listening to a podcast, or watching this or even reading this, are already ahead of a lot of people because you are taking the conscious decision to take time out of your day to listen to something to hopefully better your life. All right. Cheers, everybody. Episode 33, Pursuit of Balance. We're going to talk about the psychology of playing victim. We're talking about victim mindset. And I've done, over the course of me doing these podcasts now for a few years, I've probably done this about this might be my third or fourth. I like talking about this subject because I think it's one of the things that can move the needle for most people in life, probably the fastest, but it also is the biggest trap that most people hold themselves to. And I think about this when I say trap is a trap for their ability to grow in every area of life, right? Not just your health, but not just your finances, but everything, right? Your relationship, your mental health. So I kind of broke it up into three sections. I wrote a page back and forth on different stuff, and I'm not really sure if I want to go through all of it, but I'm going to go through. I'm going to try my best. About number one, like, what is victim mindset? Number two, how does it really affect your life? And then, number three, I think the last one I have is obviously how to fix it, right? How to address these things. Because, for me in life, the biggest thing that moves the needle has always been mindset for me. It's something I talk about all the time, obviously, with this show. And I just think it's one of the most powerful things that we can do in our lives that sometimes doesn't have a lot of dramatic changes needed to do so. Depends on the circumstances, depends on how long you've been this way. But so let's talk about it, right? It's like the first thing I wrote down is like the biggest thing holding people back is not talent, it's not money, it's not opportunity. It's the story that they tell themselves, right? So victim mindset or victimhood. Being a victim of something is different than having a victim mindset. I want to be clear on that, right? Because there are plenty of circumstances in life where we are, quote unquote, a victim of a circumstance. So I'm not talking about that so much. I'm talking about the excuses or stories that we tell ourselves that prevent us from moving forward majority of the time mentally, right? So what is victim mindset? First question, right? Number one, it's like life happens to them, right? They have little or no control over themselves. They view everything as this external reason of why they're not where they want to be in life or successful or whatever that might be. Believes that the world is meant to control them, right? So how it sounds is like, that's how I am. I don't have time. My genetics are bad. The economy sucks. Clients don't value my training. It's like, it's these excuses and beliefs that we tell ourselves. And, I touched earlier on probably about 3-4 months ago, just kind of like our belief system. And more importantly, I was touching on like limited beliefs, right? And I view this as somewhat of a similar conversation that limited beliefs do create this victim mindset in a lot of different ways, right? Because like, that is your signal. That's your hardwire. That's what you're hardwired to believe and think all the time. So it removes agency, right? And I think agency is, if I were to try to define agency for most people, I almost would think about it being, God, I got this thing in my eye, I can't get out. I would look at it as pretty much the exact opposite of what victimhood is, right? Or victim mindset is. So agency is like, we want to take back control. We want to have agency of our life, right? So when I get towards this in the end of like, how do I actually fix that? That's going to really be coming back to like, how do I actually take agency back into my life, right? Versus it removing. Okay, so number two, how does this affect your life, right? Number one, health, right? I wrote down like a couple different things like, I'm just getting older or my back is bad. And the reason why this kills progress is because effort drops when belief does, right? And for my job as a trainer and even a manager of a gym, whatever, like I talk obviously about health all the time, but this is the number one thing that prevents people from being successful. So I talked about some of like the mechanics and mechanisms of like what prevents someone from seeing results in the gym a couple weeks ago. But at the foundational level, like I gave you the mechanics of like, these are the actual things that will actually give you success and results. What I mean by that is like, your intensity of your training or your volume of your training or the tracking of your calories or workouts, etc. But at the foundation of all of that is the belief that you have that it's going to work or not, right? And the sad reality is like when I do assessments, I can hear it generally in the conversation. Like I can tell when somebody's just like, the reason why they're not successful is not so much why. Basically, a lot of it is, it feels like when I'm hearing it, it sounds like a projected blame, right? Like they're just like, well, I don't feel like that exercise routine was the greatest for me. I don't think strength training works that well for me. I forever am going to be in pain with my back because my injury is a little bit different. Like they just basically like you, it's a very closed-minded point of view, but they close themselves off from the possibility or ability of something actually having a positive change, right? And that requires you opening up your mind and taking ownership of what these things are possible or what are the things possible that I could change, right? So then the second one I wrote down is obviously talking a little bit more about business and money, right? So we blame markets, we blame competition, we blame clients, we blame our staff. And ownership is the thing that's going to accelerate growth more so than anything else, right? I talked to this, like Glenn and Cisco, maybe you've heard me say this a couple times, but like I always say, like being a manager or being a leader in any role, it requires you taking ownership as fast as you possibly can and majority of the time, right? And it's not like, oh, even when it's not my fault, I'm just going to take the L for everyone. I think there's an element of that, but there is context to that statement. But when you learn not to blame first and see, like, focus on, like, what are the things that I can do better? Or what are the things that I can do to change? Because, put it this way, everything that I've had, negative, failure, setback, whatever you want to define them as, there's always going to be one part of our brains that's going to be attracted to the projection, right? And the reason why it's comfort, right? Like it's just the comfort crisis that most of us deal with. It's much easier for my identity to say it's not my fault, right? Like it's much easier for me to say it's this person's fault. Like they're the problem. But the problem with that is there's no growth, right? And when I wrote down like ownership accelerates growth, I would also say that ownership is the only way to really have a lot of growth, right? Because it allows you to become more solution oriented towards what are the things that I need to fix? What are the things that I need to address so I can prevent this from happening again, right? We were just joking around in class. I don't know what the scenario was, but I remember that kind of the famous line, right? It was like, hey, like clear results become from clear instructions, right? And if the instructions aren't clear, the results are not going to be clear, right? And a lot of times, and I would say I kind of still struggle with this a little bit sometimes as a manager or just even in my relationship at home. Like I project a little bit of how I think as the assumption that everyone thinks that way, right? And that obviously lacks empathy because that's not me thinking about how the other person could feel or think. But it's also just kind of this easy thing that when it happens, like in just the unconscious moment that it's like, oh, like it's just a very, like I'm frustrated. Why the fuck did you not think that way? This is common sense, blah, 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 blah. But in the reality of like business or growth or whatever it is on the management side, it's like, oh, like I need to make sure that I'm giving clear instructions. I need to make sure that I'm very transparent. I need to make sure that I'm giving a step-by-step guide on how to achieve those things, right? And it doesn't matter what it is, right? It doesn't matter if you're investing in stocks or investing in real estate or your business or being an employee. What are the things that I can take ownership of? What are the things that I can focus on to become more solution oriented? That's going to be the thing that allows me to move the needle versus me staying in this victim mindset that the reason why I have no success, the world's out to get me. It's hard to do that. Like when you think about the victim mindset, we think about like, okay, we can blame our age. I dealt with this a little bit when I was younger, when I first got my career. I'm like, oh, they're just treating me that way because I'm 18. Right? Like, I remember my first management job that I had. I want to say I was 19 years old. It was my second job. Yes, I was like 19. Yeah, 19 or 18. And I got an assistant fitness manager. Then I moved up to fitness manager. And I remember, and it was a little bit of an imposter syndrome, not going to lie. Like, I had little like moments of like, maybe I am not qualified to do so, right? But whenever I would have like pushback or a disagreement or I wouldn't have a great month or results or success wasn't good, whatever we were measuring, it was very easy for me to just kind of project like, the reason why they don't listen to me is because I'm 18, right? Or I'm 19. Then we hear this with gender, right? The reason why I'm not like this is because I'm a male here, I'm a female here, or we hear this with race, we hear this with religious beliefs, we hear this with economic status. Like you can create a victim mindset around all those things, but those are all projections of the reasons why you are being treated that way versus how do I take this ownership mindset and how do I, no matter my circumstances, no matter my situation, no matter my location, how do I actually make a change? Because there's proof in the pudding. It does not matter your gender, your race, your age, your religious belief. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't make situations harder. I'm not saying that, but there's proof in the pudding that you can be successful no matter that situation, right? And for me, like in the business world, that's why I love business is because I think it gives fair equity for those that really want it, right? And it doesn't provide for those that don't want it, right? And it's very easy for someone that doesn't want it to blame, oh, it's the billionaires are the problem, the rich people this, they want us to be down, like they want to hold us back. And I get that way sometimes with government stuff too. I'm like, like it's just this is the way it's set up. But it's only giving you a reason to become emotional and create excuses and not shift the mindset towards solutions. And like out of everything I talk about, my goal is to get you guys to have a mindset that can create success in anything that you're doing in life. Right. And like wherever you feel like, okay, I'm not doing that good, or this, I could be better here. Why? And if the why starts with outside of me versus me, that should already be your telltale sign that like there's something there that we need to work on to remove this victim mindset for how you attach it. So the next one I wrote down is relationships. All right, a couple little quotes like, hey, they make me mad. They don't respect me. This is just how they are. Emotional regulation, I touched on this in another episode too, is you're responsible for your response, right? And I think one of the most powerful things in communication is the ability to regulate emotions, right? The ability to listen, the ability to not fire back when I am feeling a little bit emotional, right? So that regulation of your response requires you being a little bit more responsible, right? It requires you listening a little bit more and requires you not just thinking about why the other person is screwing up, right? And I don't know if I really dealt with this a lot because I've definitely gotten better. But like for me, when I was earlier on in my relationships before my wife, or maybe even the beginning of the relationship with my wife, it was very easy for me to just like, you're an idiot. You're not thinking right. This is not that's not right. Like I would just kind of like blame and I'd shut them down. And it's a very poor way to communicate, right? And it's just like my wife is the most empathetic person I've ever met in my entire life. Like has the biggest heart out of every single human I know. And I made that decision of like, okay, if I want to make this relationship work, which I do, I need to change how I communicate towards her, right? I need to change that I can give her room and I can give her grace for her to feel a certain way and me not shut down or disregard those emotions. Like I need to do that. And to be honest with you, it required just me shutting the fuck up every once in a while because I don't need to talk all the time. I've always been someone that's a little bit high energy, type A, go, 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 gift of gab. I could talk my way out of anything. And I realized that like kind of just being quieter half the time solved most of my problems, right? It's like just learning to listen a little bit more, learning to create space for the other person to feel and be what they want to do and not judge it, right? And I think that's a huge step in a lot of things, not just for the relationship side, but communication. The next one I wrote down is mental health, right? So the victim identity becomes comfortable, right? And this is kind of, I touched on this a little bit earlier, that like the victim mindset is a belief that shapes our identity, right? And that belief or identity, maybe a better way to say it, is a very comfortable place to live, right? Like it's very easy for me to like, I'm never wrong. Like how can I ever be wrong when I'm a victim mindset? You can't, right? So I do understand why so much of or so many people and so many of us just get stuck, right? Like we get stuck in this victim mindset. And the reason why we get stuck is like, it's comfortable. It's easy. Like I don't really need to argue anything when I know I'm right. I don't need to prove my point, right? It's just like, I know that I'm right. I know that I'm not the problem. I know it's the other person. I know it's the circumstances. I know it's the government. Like it's always easy to create comfort around that, right? So that's obviously a huge part of it. This was kind of an interesting thing that I was looking at, but they call it like the secondary gain, right? Which being kind of like being a victim can provide a secondary gain to this, right? So sympathy, avoidance of responsibility, lower expectations, and identity stability, right? So like kind of touching what I was touching on, if your identity makes you comfortable, it's because of a lot of these things, right? Like the avoiding of responsibility, like responsibilities are not your problem if you avoid them because you're the victim, right? Lowering expectations, right? The thing that when you do take ownership and you do put yourself in a position to be wrong, or you do put yourself in a position to fail, there's higher expectations, right? Like you are raising the bar and the expectations of need. Versus the other person that's not thinking that way, that is the victim, their expectations are low. Because even if I am wrong, I'm not. Like even if I really was, I'm not, right? Because I lowered the expectations behind it. So that was number 2. Now I want to kind of shift it towards like, how do I fix these problems, right? How do I not stay in this mindset and get stuck here, right? And we touched on it a little bit with that last part, that like why it's easy to get stuck there, right? Because of the identity change, the beliefs that you've created. And you got to remember, like, A lot of this, I think, is a little bit of upbringing and people's childhood and people's friends and people's circumstances with school and jobs. Like, it's just very easy that some of us are going to feel that we kind of get stuck in these places, right? But then it also like that quote unquote being stuck also can be comfortable, like we mentioned. So I want to talk about, okay, well, what are the things that really move the needle to get me out of this? What are the little practices that I can put in place that allow me to not be in this mindset all the time, right? So I actually can make a lot of transition and progress in my life for the things that I want to, right? So first one I wrote down is radical ownership, right? And I put radical in front of it just because that adjective for me has always resonated when you really want to make a change. Like that means like at any time, no matter the circumstances, you are taking ownership, right? And for me, it's I think the most dear to me because like as an older brother, as a friend, as a son, as an owner, as a manager, as a coach and trainer, as a future father. Like I have all these things were like things that people that I want to take care of. And I know that I kind of said this last week that we learn from what gets caught, not what gets taught. And taking ownership is an act, right? It's something that we need to do, right? So it's not blaming, it's taking ownership. So like ask like, what is in my control? High agency thinking changes outcomes. So when I say high agency, I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. Is like agency is now that mindset of like high agency is someone that takes a lot of ownership, someone that can control their situation. And it's not controlled through manipulation. It's controlled by thinking about what am I actually able to control here? And the reality is like I will say this, like something that I struggle with is the conversation around like, well, what is under our control? Like there's some things that are just under our control. Right. Actually, we had a situation here in the gym today. By the time you guys are hearing this, is probably a week later or whatever. But we had a situation today where someone actually dislocated their knee. And it was just from class overlap. Someone was doing some crawls behind them. Someone took a lunge. They lunged backwards with weight on their back. And then they kind of adjusted their foot and dislocated their knee. Right. And it scared the coaches that were coaching there because you feel a little responsible. Right. Like this is your class. You're supposed to be leading these people. You're supposed to be directing to them. And there's two things that can happen from this. You can either choose to blame the person that maybe was walking too close behind them, right? Or we can take ownership. We can have high agency in how we view this of like, what is in my control? And what I was telling her was like, you got to remember, don't blame yourself, right? Because the first thing you do if you blame yourself emotionally, this is going to be harder than this because it's hard to see someone that is in pain. It's hard to be feeling responsible, especially when you have a class coming in and a class still finishing up their class. So you have a bunch of people around you. So a lot of that can be a very overwhelming emotionally thing, but there's two things that could happen. You're either going to play victim and say that, well, this person's a fucking idiot. Like they should not have been walking so close to them or crawling behind them. Or I can take ownership of like, okay, like, well, maybe I could have been better at just being on top of the coaching and making sure that they're moving over to the side, like being a little bit more on top of it. And what I was saying in the beginning is like, sometimes I have a hard time, like really separating that things that really are not in my control. I still believe I feel like I can control this. And the reality is I can't, right? Like the last coach, this is probably about 2 months ago that left Palo Alto, went back to another gym, and it kind of fucked me up a little bit. Not gonna lie, like mentally and emotionally, I was like, damn, we got him up to speed. We got him. He was doing 35, 40 PT set, like the quickest I've ever on ramped somebody. Like the quickest I could take a coach from. Like our industry is always notorious that it's a slow start because you have to build your pipeline, you have to build your client list, you have to get, there's a lot of conversion. We got him from like 0 to 6 figures and like that. And so I was proud of myself, obviously, because it's like, cool, like we actually do have the ability to like get coaches paid and get coaches booked very fast. And then when I heard the news that he was leaving, I was like a little like, damn, like maybe it's not the money part. Maybe it's not like, maybe it was the culture, like it was hard for me to really separate mentally, like, what am I actually in control of, right? What am I like out of control of? And then for me, more importantly, like when I think about this is I always should just move on to the future of like, okay, how do I prevent this from happening? Right? Like, what are the reasons why? And the downside is like, I don't think you'll ever get honest answers, like 100% honest answers. I might get a majority of it. And I'm like, okay, I took the feedback and I like exit interviews as much as I like an entrance interview. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's change this. Let's apply this. Let's bring it up to the team. Let's ask. I like autonomy as much as anybody else, but I also like my, I like structure in business, but I also like my coaches to be part of building that structure, right? Because for me, it's like building the business alone is kind of a lonely thing, I've realized. And like the more input and contribution I can get from the coaches, the better I feel. So I think just like having a lot of that is a big part of me, right? So not to get too sidetracked, I've already gotten sidetracked a lot on that. Radical ownership, number one. Number two is just auditing your language, right? Your language shapes your identity. And it sounds like a little woohoo sometimes when I hear this from me personally, because I'm like, okay, like I can be hard on myself, like verbally, but I can still be nice and graceful to myself. So there's a little nuance to that I think some people have the capacity to do so. But I will say every single year that I've gotten older, I've learned the power of the words more and more and more to myself. And I will say for me, I've always kind of had borderline this like delusional confidence. Like I'd rather just tell myself that it's possible, even if it's not possible, right? I'd rather tell myself it's going to be easy, even if it's hard. Like I think I always tell that to my wife. I'm like, with kids in the future, like, you hear all these stories of like your life is going to change. It's going to be hard for you to maintain your health and fitness. All these things, right? And these are all excuses, in my opinion. And I'm like, I know I'm going to make it easy, right? Because the first thing I need to do is I need to start with the belief. I need to start with the language that I tell myself. Because if I can audit that, even if it is hard, it's not as hard because I've told myself differently, or I thought about it differently, or I believed it differently, right? So, when you think about words, I've always said this, like, you don't have to, you get to, right? You don't have to, you choose to, right? And when you can change the framing of what you're telling yourself, that life is not happening to you, life is happening for you, right? And these little changes are dramatic, right? Another one that I like to talk about in the gym is not saying I can't. I just said I haven't learned how yet, right? So when people, clients more importantly, or even coaches say I can't do so, I like to reframe that no, you just haven't done it yet, right? And yet is a very, very powerful word in the language for us because yet creates an opportunity. Yet keeps the door open, right? Can't, already closed-minded. Can't because of this, blame, right? So the language is going to be a big thing for a lot of us. The next one I have is separating your pain or separating pain from identity, right? Bad things are going to happen. Like that's just remember that first things and foremost, right? I think about this a lot with business, and I think about this a little bit with life outside of that. Like just as I got older, like little like snowboarding, surfing, my Harley, like things that are risk. I'm like, hey, like bad things could happen, but I try not to think about it because really personally for me, it's like if I can just stay optimistic and just believe that things are always going to be good, like why not just deal with it that way? Bill Burr said this in an interview before, a comedian, and he goes, "Do you ever stress?" And he goes, "Nah, not really." And he goes, "Why?" Well, he goes, "Well, like if I had the ability to not stress, why would I not?" And he goes, "Well, like things like could be that happen negatively in your life or bad things happen." He goes, "Yeah. And when those things happen, I'll deal with them then. And then maybe for a short term, I'll be a little stressed, right? But I'm not going to have anxiety around creating a problem before the problem's even there, right? And that's where anxiety is an interesting thing is like we create a problem out of something that's not a problem yet. We create a problem out of something that's not even real yet, right? Like we're ahead of the ball, right? And it's like versus it's like, no, just handle it when it comes, right? So bad things happen, but experiencing hardship does not equal being a victim, right? Because that is just a part of the journey of life. Failing does not equal being a failure. And then the last one is I put an injury does not equal a broken body. So when you think about the framing of what you're going about, how I adjust these things, understand that these things don't just create, oh, I am a victim, or I can't do this, or it's impossible, right? Like you need to change the frame behind that because that's going to change the identity behind it as well, right? So the shift is this happened, not this defines me. Okay, the next one I have is build evidence of agency, right? So confidence comes from evidence. I love this line. I've heard this, a lot in a lot of spaces, but like, confidence is one of those things that evidence will stack over time and you'll become more confident. So when people say like, how do I become more confident? Kind of what I touched on a couple minutes ago, I think it starts with having a little bit of a delusional mindset towards it of like just being overly confident. Right? Not overly confident, but just walking in there and faking it till you make it, right? Like, I hear that term fake it till you make it. And there's parts of me that like, and there's parts of me like, no, like, why would you not? Like, if you can fake it till you make it, that is basically you choosing to have the mindset that I'm just going to make it work, even if I don't fucking know what it is, right? Like, I love that little meme. It's like entrepreneurship is jumping off a cliff and then putting your parachute on, right? Like, or then trying to figure out how it works. A lot of it is a little blind, right? And majority of life also too, you need to understand is a little blind, right? So I think like those are a lot of things that's just like, okay, like understand that will come as you stack evidence as well, right? So that's going to be the second part. So the way I look at it for me is like, number one, set small goals and execute, right? Execution is the thing that needs to be followed up. It's not just talking about it. It's not just listening to this episode. It's not watching this episode that's going to make you change your life. It's then taking action behind it, right? And for you, it's like, how do I get out of this mindset? Number one, set some small goals and accomplish those, execute on them, right? And even just taking action and execution is proof. Second one is keep promises to yourself. Lying to yourself is the worst thing you can do, right? Because you are basically creating an imposter inside yourself, right? Lying to other people is obviously just as bad, but lying to yourself is the worst possible thing you can do because you're basically you're shaping your identity that you are not like it's just over time. Think about it. Oh, I'm going to do this tomorrow, or I'm going to do this now, or you're like, and you never do it. Right, like you're basically in the back reinforcing this identity of who you don't want to be, right? Because you're not taking action behind it, right? So make sure that when you're doing things, start small, but keep the promises to yourself and be genuine and have integrity behind that as well. Track habits. That's obviously a game changer for a lot of us for a lot of different things. And improve one controllable variable every day, right? Just control one thing, right? And how do I improve on this? How do I improve on this? And how do I improve on this? Because progress is that thing that's going to drive that motivation, but it's also going to be that thing that reshapes the identity of what we have. Because with action, you, like I said, are going to develop some success and some results, and that evidence is going to make you more confident. And then you're going to start to realize, whoa, I do have a lot more power than I thought. I do have the ability to be way more successful. And also, whoa, it's not everyone else's fault. They're like, the reason why I wasn't doing it is because I wasn't doing it, right? And I think once you start to experience some of that success through your own work and your own education and your own execution of those things, you're going to start to be like, man, I fucked up. Like I was the one that was limiting my true potential all the time. That is probably one of the biggest fears that I think I personally hold as a human is like, I don't want to live a life where I get old and I'm like, did I not capitalize on the potential? Like, did I not maximize and get as much juice out of that squeeze, right? So you want to get as much out of possible or as much out of life as possible. And that obviously comes from that. So agency is going to be the thing that's going to help you guys build momentum. The last one is environment check. Victim mindset is something that's spread socially is what I wrote down. So we all know this. And this is the biggest thing that I can tell people that is going to hurt your chance of changing and not becoming this person. And it's also the hardest. And the reason why it's the hardest is because everyone on the internet, majority of the people, you have to remember, you listening to this and you listening to a podcast, or watching this or even reading this, are already ahead of a lot of people because you are taking the conscious decision to take time out of your day to listen to something to hopefully better your life, right? Or to hopefully learn or to hopefully make a positive change, right? The downside is, and the sad reality of humans is, misery loves company. So there is a bigger demographic of people that want to bitch about life and complain about things than there are people that actually want to make changes and share the reasons or the possibilities of how those changes can be made for you, right? So it is this toxic thing that just bleeds into every area of our life, unfortunately for the negative. So just remember that, like, really be aware and conscious of checking like the people you spend time with, the pages that you follow, the music that you listen to, because the more you hear blame, the more you hear the victim mindset, the more you hear the reasons why it's not possible, the more you shape your beliefs and create an identity that's going to become that. So that's just the last thing I kind of wrote down for them. And then a couple little notes I wrote down. Victim mindset is often a byproduct of limited beliefs, which I touched on. And victim mindset also drains vitality, right? It's not like when I talked about this in the episode, however long ago, longevity versus vitality. Longevity is the idea of maximizing lifespan and time here, but like vitality is maximizing health span and like the energy and the power that we have in the life that we live. So being a victim mindset is draining of your vitality, right? Like it is taking away from the enjoyment. Like think about it. Like why would you, if you had the possibility to choose being happy or to being sad, why are we choosing sadness? If we had the ability to believe that something was possible versus impossible, like it's always, sometimes it sounds like it's dumbfounding to me. I'm like, why would someone decide and make a conscious decision to choose to do so? Right. And the reality why is, like I said, misery loves company. Right. And it's like people like to, we like to feel similar. We like to feel that we're alike, and we like to feel that we're supported. Right. And when I bitch about something that someone else is bitching about, it's like, the reality is like, okay, cool. I found my people. Right. And there's a lot less people that are talking about the good stuff. And it's like, out of all the things in this business that I think is like, I don't have an ROI on financially, I look at the podcast, I look at the social media, I look at some of the marketing stuff. I'm like, is there a 100% ROI on it? Like, if like business brand? The answer is no. But what it does give me is it gives me an ROI on my purpose and my mission for what I'm doing, right? Because my most important thing is actually making change. Because at the end of the day, all the other stuff is going to be great. All the other stuff is going to be a beautiful byproduct of what you do if you are good at it. But the thing that's really going to make me sleep well at night and be able to share experiences with my friends and people around me that I love and my kids in the future is finding something that I was actually passionate about, right? Finding something I actually enjoyed, right? So those are all the things I wrote down. I hope that kind of resonates with some of you guys. As always, I will take any suggestions on podcasts. I know a couple of you have kind of shared some things that you want to hear, and it really helps me. So if you are someone that is listening to this and is a regular listener, I appreciate you following and listening as well. And I will see you guys next week. Take care.